Welcome to What the Heck's your source for Warhammer Underworlds in under 30 glory for just standing in some random places. I'm your host, Davey, and with me, as always, I have my co-host, Phil. How are you doing, Phil?
Hey, I'm doing good.
And we have with us a special guest, and this will immediately tell you if you don't already know, the topic for this episode. We have Sandro, Grand Clash champion, in to talk to us about his experiences. Sandro, welcome to the cast, and thank you for coming on. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I'm great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. We are going to break down your deck, talk to you about how you came to it, and talk about your experience at the Grand Clash. Will be kind of the focus for what we're doing. If anyone wants to get in touch with us to ask any follow-up questions or such, you can get us at WTHcast or whatthehexcast@gmail.com. For community shoutouts, we're gonna kind of jump in. I think we've got a heck of an episode to get to, so we're gonna forego some of our usual stuff. I just wanted to give a shout out. Currently going on right now is the LVO day one. We have a shout out to Aman, who took the first one. He went 6-0-1 with the Wild Hunt in a best of hunt. In a best, well, kind of a best of hunt, because John Davis, Tony Field, and Aman all took Wild Hunt. But he took it down on the Friday skirmish. Now there's a Saturday skirmish going on right now. So back at it again. And then our own personal shout out to Jeff Osborne, who took Overlords and finished 8th on the first day with a respectable 5-2. So did well, had some close games, and it was enjoyable to kind of listen along with. But Sandro, we're gonna turn it to you here. Before we actually get in, can you give us a quick breakdown of how you got into the hobby? What hooked you on Underworlds, or what got you into Games Workshop in general?
Yeah, sure. So basically, I come from basically like a Yu-Gi-Oh and Pokemon TCG background. So I've always loved like card-based games in general. And so like when this and I tried getting into the hobby as a whole, because I just love I love the aesthetics. I love everything about just the models themselves. But I always found that time for me was a barrier. So when Underworlds came out, it was like it married the models and that hobby aspect that I've been looking for with a card game. So for me, it was a no-brainer. And I've pretty much been playing since Shadespire, hit the street, so to speak.
So you hopped on right away with it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
All right. Let me ask you this: so have you been to many clashes before? Was this one of your first, or?
So no, actually, I've been to quite a few clashes. So I won the second ever Grand Clash in Warhammer World. So I took that with the Steelhearts champions. I was actually one of the people who created the Evil Relic format.
Sure.
So I beat basically Lee from and Mike Carlin's group from Steel City Underworld. So great, shout out to them. And so that was like the first Grand Clash that I won. But pretty much I've been to most of them in terms of the ones that take place in Nottingham anyway.
All right. Well, that's two very big ones under your belt already here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the lead up to. We're gonna kind of go the pre-tournament deck breakdown, first day, second day, and then moving onwards. But let's talk about the lead up. Did you know? So you did bring Grymwatch. I think everybody probably knows that at this point. What
my babies?
Did you know from a long time back that you were going to be bringing Grymwatch, or was that
100%?
Okay.
Yes. So basically, all the way from when they came out, like September, October time. When they came out, basically, I fell in love with them straight away. It was literally love at first sight. I love everything about them. So like the lore, the fact that they're very versatile, their aesthetic, their faction cards. I think everything just basically spoke to me. And so way back when we had the Clash in October, I took them for the first time, and I placed mids, it wasn't like great, it wasn't awful. It was just I was getting used to them, because up until that point I've been running Authorities Guardians, and obviously with the rotation they were hit quite hard. So I was kind of looking for Warband to replace them. And before then I was running Curse Breakers. Before that I was running the Steelhearts Champions. So going from 3-man warbands /4 to like a 7-man warband, for me that was a big change.
Yeah, it's a big shift.
So yeah, so all the way, so you kind of think about like, yeah, all the way from October till now, I was kind of like learning how to like really like deploy them effectively, how to like, you know, the ins and outs of the warband. And so yeah,
Let's talk about that. From October to January, you knew what warband you were going to take. That gave you a good 3 to 4 months of refinement on this. What do you feel like your takeaway from your October placement was, and along the way, what do you feel like were the big sort of evolutions or things in general terms? We'll get into specific cards in a bit. Was there any broad arc to it, or did it feel more like small changes?
no, there was definitely. So for me, the big change, it was about like learning what to deploy where, based against like who I'm facing against. So if I'm facing against like a very aggro warband, or a warband that can take my guys off the board, you know, I'm talking about the little guys off the board quickly, then, you know, my deployment might be very different. You know, I might put like the 3 small little ghouls at the back, you know, and put like Gristlewell, Valric, Crackmarrow, and the bats, you know, like at the front. So that was something that I had to like get my head around. Also in terms of board choices, and so that was another big thing. You know, what impact will that have if I get the objectives but my opponent longboards me, or versus if my opponent gets the objectives, what board do I pick? So I think they were the things that back in October I just didn't have 100%, and I felt like going into like January, I pretty much nailed it.
Sure.
Nice.
What does your practice look like? Are you going to local events? Do you have a strong group of players that you can run against, try some of the different matchups, or what? How do you other than just sort of thinking about it? What's your number one way of sort of getting those repetitions in to improve for something like this?
So actually, like one of my best mates, Chris Bailey's, he was also at the event with me in January and also in October. He literally is my neighbor, so we
convenient.
get a lot of chance to like you know, meet at least, you know, once a week from time to time, and just basically test new things and talk shop and you know, test new deck build ideas, you know, in a safe environment where we can go, okay, fine, you know, this was horrible, didn't work, or versus, you know, this is actually a really good idea, you know, let's see where we can take this further. And then other than that, I also have a group of friends like in Nottingham and just on the outskirts that we meet up and play from time to time.
So, based on all this practice going in, were there any matchups that you feared more than others? And it may have been a case where you felt confident into all of them, but what particular matchups were you particularly that would say have you on your toes before you went into a game?
So that's actually a very good question, because like, so all the way from October up until, so I actually won a local tournament in November. So this was before Temporary Victory and all that came out. So still had the, so I basically had managed to tweak my deck from the power deck from what it was back in October all the way in November. And then, so I managed to win a local tournament against Dan Jones and Benny Mohagan, which were also 2 of my opponents in this clash. So very good players. So what that taught me was the fact that so Thorns is the kind of matchup where you pretty much back then you toss a coin and it was like you either win or you lose. So I was going into this one thinking, okay, so we've obviously Thorns were hit pretty hard with the FAR list, you know, the Forsaken and Restricted list. And so I was like, okay, so in my mind, I was like, okay, is it still going to be a 50-50 coin toss-up, or, you know, am I going to be, you know, more in control? So that was definitely one of the matchups that I was, you know, kind of like wary about. And then the other kind of matchups, it was like aggro warbands, because obviously they've got the resilience and the strength to take your guys off the board, and also stopping you from inspiring. So things like, I was thinking of like Iron Souls Condemners, Maegor's Fiends, if anyone brought those kinds of warbands, it was like, okay, so what's that going to look like in those matchups? And then the wild card for me was Lady Harrow's Mournflight, because I'd heard, you know, a lot of people going, oh, we're going to take these. They seem to be really good. They're kind of like an aggro flex warband. So like they're kind of like the Grymwatch, but, you know, whereas the Grymwatch do the objective placement really well, the Mournflight, they can do that, but they can also come into your field and do heavy damage if they need to. So that was for me, that was like the wild card that I was like, okay, so how's that going to look like? And in preparation for the event, actually, my friend Chris was actually running them. So for like a whole week, I got to test my Grymwatch versus them.
Oh, nice.
And find out like all the ins and outs. And it actually paid off a lot in the tournament because I ended up playing. That was like the most common matchup that I went up against.
Yeah. I know you mentioned that you thought that the changes from the FAR affected some of the matchups you were worried about. But did it affect your style in any way? Were there any significant changes that you had to make when that came through kind of late?
I mean, obviously, yeah, that's yeah. I mean, so keeping guessing was a big blow for a lot of warbands, but actually, and I originally thought that it was a big blow for the Grymwatch, but in hindsight, I didn't feel that because I actually felt that I had good replacements or good substitute in this case for all the cards that were hit. Mm-hmm. So I was able to actually quickly like adapt my, because I was playing a flex. So my deck, I mean, you've seen the list. It's pretty much a flex objective playstyle. So I was able to basically adapt that very quickly with cards that are still available and that aren't restricted or forsaken. So I think that So I didn't feel like for me particularly in my playstyle, it was hit as hard as for example Thorns. Because before, I mean, Thorns, the fact that you're able to just go, I score temporary victory by activating Varklav, and I also score Scrum, and I also do all these other things and get onto the field and apply a lot of pressure. So I felt like it slowed the Thorns enough to make them no longer, a tidal wave that comes and you can't just stop them.
That's a really interesting point. I think it's one of the strengths of Grymwatch is that they have a very deep bench of cards. So as universals become restricted, they often can just look back at their other in faction cards and say, this is just a fine replacement right here.
Yeah.
Phil, do you have anything else, or we're talking about the deck now, and we've taken a peek at it, but let's assume that the listener hasn't, and we'll if unless you got anything, Phil, we'll start breaking it down.
Yeah, well, I just had one other question of just like what was your sense of the overall meta in your area at that point? Did it reflect and did your sense of that meta reflect what you saw at the Grand Clash? Because I think sometimes we get some conversations of like we're starting to get into sort of almost like a rock paper scissors type situation, and the fact that maybe the US and the UK meta are actually a little bit different. So I'd be interested to see if what you were expecting is what you actually saw.
100%, yes. What I expected was exactly what I saw. I expected a lot of Thorns. I expected a lot of one flight, and that is exactly what I saw in the events. The things that I was a little bit surprised by was the curse breakers, because there was there was quite a number of curse breakers that qualified for top 16. And they're still good and they're still great, which I think is amazing because I really like the warband. So the fact that Magic isn't dead, I think that speaks volumes for the fact that if you put enough time and effort with any warband in any meta, you can pretty much do well.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So I think in terms of the meta here, from what correct me if I'm wrong, but over there it's kind of like more aggro.
Certainly, that is the perception. I haven't this. Event this weekend is kind of our first big one, I think, since some of the latest big changes. So that's a reception, and I think after this weekend that's happening right now, i.e. a week ago when people are listening to this, that'll kind of been the litmus test to see if that theory is correct. Okay.
Whereas, I think here there's a lot more flex control with aggro built in there. So I think that and that's exactly what I saw over there.
All right. Well, so knowing what you having correctly predicted, what did you put in your deck to face this? And I think, as always, a good place to start would be the objectives. If you can break it down any way you like, if you want to run through the surges or end phase or whatever format feels constructed to.
So so if we go into the surges, so I put pervasive delusion. I think that's it's a great objective. It's extremely reliable. I've never not scored it in any of the games I've ever had.
This is three gambits, 3 ploys.
3 gambits, and correct. And you score it, which I think is it's a great card, especially when you've got Frenzied Search in there as well. Like I put in, it's pretty much a guaranteed surge.
Mm-hmm.
Swift capture, again, great objective in terms of I mean, because you're typically going to be holding an objective in your side of the field. So then being able to get, one onto your opponent's side of the field, pretty much, it plays exactly into what, the flex play style that the Grymwatch are great at. In the Name of the King staple, it's one of my absolute favorite objectives, and then also putting in there temporary victory. I mean, if you're doing one, you're going to do the other one as well. So that for me was like a no-brainer. And then my absolute favorite surge is the Shifting Madness. Because again, it's one of those that it can be literally my opponent makes an action, and I'm going to just score this because they didn't target the guy that was on the objective for that particular turn. So it's it can be it's set up properly. It's a really easy surge to score. And then the new addition to the deck was obviously Gathered Momentum. So from what I had in my deck before, I had Calculated Risk, and obviously I got rid of that for Temporary Victory because again, for me that was a no-brainer. 2 Glory surge is great. And then Gathered Momentum, it just works so well in this deck because you can always score it with the bats because they're never the first target for anyone.
Right.
Just, okay, they can't hold objectives, so I'm not going to go for them. And then obviously once the Grymwatch Inspire, any one of them can score this card. And if you're having a really good game, the fact that it's also a hybrid and you can score it through through just scoring two or more.
How often would you say you find yourself scoring it in that alternate option?
I actually scored it in a couple of games, which I was very surprised, very pleasantly surprised in. So it wasn't obviously not as often as you think, but it can happen. So if you've got it in hand, I mean, in one of my games, I actually managed to score Temporary Victory in the Name of the King and then Gathered Momentum, and so that was the 5 Glory.
Wow.
And that also the psychological impact that it has on your opponent is huge. When they see they've just scored 3 objectives, literally for just getting onto some of that speaks volumes in terms of setting the pace of the game.
How about the end phase then? What have you got for those?
So end phase, I've got the Ever Reliable Fired Up, which again with the Grymwatch, it's pretty much an auto include, and then obviously because I've got very easy to score surge cards, I've put in Opening Gambit and Combination Strikes. And again, Combination Strikes was one of those cards that it wasn't a last minute change, but it was so. I had before, so when I was testing this with my friend Chris, I was testing the Old Veterans card, which is basically if you've got 3 hunters that are alive at the end of the third end phase, you score basically 2 glory, which, and I was actually consistently managing to score that card. What I found though is that it slowed me down a lot, because having a third end phase card that was only 2 glory, which, I say only 2 glory, but, it just basically meant that if I was drawing that at the beginning, I had to either discard it, or if I kept it, it just slowed my entire game plan down. So I thought, okay, what can I replace it with that? Now that we don't have to keep them guessing. And I thought, I'm going to try Combination Strikes. And since I put that in, it synergizes so well with the rest of the deck that I've only had to get rid of it once, because obviously in terms of the cards, there's only one card combination where I found that I had to get rid of, which would have been Combination Strikes, Opening Gambit, and Solid Gains. That was the only time where I'm if I draw these 3 cards at the beginning of the game, get rid of them. Any of the combinations should be okay.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, the risk of Combination Strike is if it gums up your hand. You have a deck that basically none of your surges depend on a dice roll. Somebody like Thundrake's Profiteers, who've traditionally used that to good effect, particularly obviously when there were more surges available, they still have some that require, Headshot requires the crit to show up. If they have, Death from Afar that requires a successful kill, so those can get gummed up by the dice rolls. Yours are the only way you can get gummed up is by card draw, and you've got a very reliable way of scoring that. I can't imagine there's too many times when you draw it outside of your opening hand where it's ever been a problem.
Yeah, correct. No, absolutely. And then obviously cards like Supremacy, Path to Victory, they're just staples in there as well. So I think it's kind of I was actually very proud of the objective deck because it all just flows very well. And all you need is to basically get at least score either a surge, which then starts the avalanche from just starts things off, or you need to basically be able to score some solid glory either in the form of Path to Victory or Supremacy at the end of of the round, round one, so that you're in a good place to set up for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
What is the total glory for those not doing it on a scratch pad at home?
So we're talking about, if I'm not mistaken, about 18.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
18, but very reliable. Actually, 18. That's what I find is has been a problem as I try to make aggro decks. Is they don't have enough end phase glory, and so I've got a risky 15 or a reliable ish 14 or a really reliable 13, and those are just not high enough. Phil and I were just talking about this right before we recorded, is how hard it is to get to push the glory ceiling high enough in some of those decks to keep pace. All right. Well, what about the ploys? What about the gambits?
So I actually divided them into two sections. So I've got my what I call my push or setup gambits. So I've got like pack advance, falling visage, distraction, sidestep, and center retention, which is all about me either scoring my my surge, or my objective play, or about me positioning myself to get into my opponent and start slashing and hacking. And then to help me do that, I've got my my others. So like my other ploys or gambits, which is like Confusion, Haymaker, Restless Prize, Spectral Wings, and Friend and Search, and they're all about either getting me more support, or it's like they're basically clutch cards, which will allow me to in a pinch be able to either get an attack off, get to an objective that otherwise was too far away, or just get me more cards. So I think that's the idea, that between the my gambits, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Confusion. Yeah. I will say, as somebody who's played against Grymwatch often enough, I am most fearful, of many things, but I would say when I know they have confusion in there, it's soul crushing, because one thing I often like to do is I'll just stand on an objective, and then I've got, at least I can say that one they can't take without striking me off and having the push card. But here, you don't even need to do the first. You can just have confusion. You just have to get close to me, and then you're going to steal it from me. So those that I find that one particularly backbreaking and not always included.
Yeah, that's true. I think what I really like about Confusion is that it literally came out way back with the Shadespire core set, and it's now become a card that's just so good. I mean, I remember a time where virtually you wouldn't see Confusion, not really, in any competitive deck, and now it's just for certain decks, it's almost like a staple. So, and I think that's great.
Definitely.
That depending on the evolution of the meta, you can have cards like that become extremely useful.
Yeah, I can remember a day, I would say it was just in the very first few weeks of Shadespire, when it was Iron Skulls and Sepulchral Guard, Reavers and Steel Souls, or Steel Hearts, I should say. And my mental math was that in every deck I will include Sidestep, Distraction, and Confusion. And then, slowly some of those had to step away. But I love that they're sitting here in your deck. So they come back around again. Okay. Do you divide your upgrades similarly, or how do you organize those?
Yes. So my upgrades are actually, if my ploys are all about positioning and all about like what I call them like clutch cards. My upgrades are all about like offense. So I've got essentially 7 upgrades that are all about doing damage or giving me more dice. So you've got Larva Lance, which for me is like best upgrade in the game, because it suddenly turns a little guy into a massive threat, especially from like round 2 onwards, with range and all kinds of dice that can't be modified. So that's pretty cool. Heroic Vision, again, is a great card to just give the Grymwatch extra dice, and you can give it to any of them, so that's pretty sweet. Seized Weapon is my favorite faction-specific weapon.
Heartbreaker. So good.
I mean, in one of my games, and it was actually against Freya, day 1, fourth. That was my 4th game. I actually managed to take one of the Curse Breakers off the board in the end phase by upgrading Seized Weapon to one of my guys, doing one and me going, and I score 1 glory, thank you very much. And it's just such a good card.
Yeah.
That I can't. Yeah, and also it counteracts Crown of Avarice, because again it's not a gambit, so you can get that cheeky kill. Obviously, Tome of Offerings, Trophy Belt, just for the extra glory, and the fact that you've got so many targets in your warband that you can give that combination to. That's pretty cool as well. And then Great Strength and Well Motivated are just those extra +1 damage cards that that makes suddenly Crack Marrow extremely threatening. Even Grizzlewell, even Valreek, extremely threatening. And then I've got the last 3 slots are basically it's to discourage my opponent from going and trying to kill one of my key guys at that particular time. So like Sudden Growth is a great card. I mean, Sudden Growth actually, dare I say it, won me the tournament on the weekend when when I gave it to the Herald, and then Frederick was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna, he's on like 1 wound, and then he just used the spell to try and kill him, and then I was like, no, he still has another 2 wounds left. So that made a massive difference. Those +2 wounds is great. Impervious Delusion is also a great card. The fact that you can go, Sudden Growth plus Impervious Delusion suddenly makes like Crack Marrow almost unkillable, or at least very hard to kill. And then Crown Ravers is just, I think it's still a staple, even though obviously I like the FAQ that came out with it. That now it's not as broken as it was before, but I still think it's a very good card, especially if you've got guys that can come back from the grave. Just again, it's to discourage your opponent from picking off, or you can even give it to one of the other guys, Valreek or Gristlewell or even Crack Marrow, and just go, okay, so if you are going to invest a lot of manpower to like get rid of these guys, you're at least not going to get the glory. So you kind of force your opponent to make a choice between do they take that really good important piece off the board and give you glory, or do they just go after someone else, at which point that piece is going to go after them and havoc.
Yeah, we talked about your objective deck having a glory ceiling of 18, but we can see here in your upgrades that there are 3 upgrades that will improve your glory flow with the Trophy Belt, Tome of Offerings, and even the Crown of Avarice. So really your glory ceiling is kind of stealth higher than it first appears.
Absolutely. So. I actually managed to score, I think it was like 12 glory against one of my opponents in day 2. With the combination of Tome and the Trophy Belt, because Crack Marrow just went killing ghosts left, right, and center. So
sure,
that was, and that was quite surprising and also
because I was kind of wondering, like, I mean, not to say that the Grymwatch can't be destructive. They have plenty of aggressive potential, but I was just wondering, since you're it seems like the most of your focus is on holding objectives, and so I was wondering, did you really get a chance to take advantage of getting kills with the upgrades? But it sounds like yes, you did. You got a lot of Gloria from those.
Absolutely, because ultimately, I mean, once you get your guys into position and okay, I only need 3 guys to hold 3 objectives at any given time. What do you do for the rest of the game while you go and kill stuff? That's what the power deck's geared at. It's geared towards. So if the upgrades are very offensive, whereas the gambits are very sort of like disruptive in that way, if that makes sense, because you can use them. So there was also like one of my matches. It was actually really cool because it was against Dan Jones around game 3, and he had like 3 of his Thorns of Briar Queens around my bats, and so I was like, I had this sidestep in my hand, and I was saving it up until that point. None of them had inspired, so they were going to inspire in the next activation. And so I kind of had to make a choice. Do I play sidestep to try and get one of my guys onto an objective to score some glory, or do I deny him the inspiration? And actually, I chose to deny him the inspiration. By doing that, it basically shut down his next strategy. I actually saw that he was quite surprised. He was like, "Oh, chapeau!" He was like, "Oh, okay, so I'm going to have to do something else here." And I think that I think the fact that you can play, especially with pushes, you can play them in a way that it's either disruptive or it's geared towards you getting objectives. It's super important. I mean, my friend Chris always says, like, in a meta where objective plays is so important, push is king. Right?
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I think that that's why I geared my gambits that way.
That makes sense. I know that when I play, especially in game 2 or 3, I'll be trying to count the pushes that I'm aware of, and just kind of keep track. How in danger am I of the board state changing suddenly from those pushes? Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think they've always been strong. It was it was our very first episode was about pushes, but I think in this even more so than before. They're pretty spectacular. Before we jump into your games, there's one thing that I think I'd like to just touch on, and that is talking about board placement. As far as going to this, did you have? I'm sure there were things that would change for depending on matchups, but your preference. Let's say if the choice was yours, would you be taking the 3 objectives, or would you be setting diagonal, or how would you be making that decision, and what would factor in?
It very much depended on like what warband I was going to face against. So for the norm, I would always try and get the 3 objectives, just because to make the for example swift capture a lot easier. You'd want to put like 1, so I'd put like 2 on my side and then like 1 towards my opponent's side as close as possible to me. Because if I did draw into swift capture, I'd want to be scoring that as easily as possible. But it kind of against like thorns, I definitely want the boards, because they can come to me. I won't let them be scoring temporary victory or anything like that so easily. Against aggro warbands, I'd probably so for example, if I was going to go up against Maegor's Fiends or the Iron Soul Condemners, I'd probably give them the boards. I mean, luckily I didn't go up against them, but I'd probably give them the objectives and set up long boards, or try and mitigate the threat range, if that makes sense. And then it was pretty much so. For example, against if I was facing off against a warband like the Mournflight or Thorns, I'd always try and pick a board with no lethal hexes on my side, and with as much or as little, blocked hexes as possible, so that I could get my guys onto the opponent's side of the field as quickly as possible.
Sure.
So, which I'm very happy, because I got to use a lot of the Shadespire boards against those kinds of matchups, because they just worked really, really well.
But it sounds like you, and this is something we think is fundamental. I think it sounds like you had the ability to have a good game plan, whether or not you had control of the objectives or the boards. You might have a particular preference in a matchup, but it wasn't a deal breaker if you didn't get the one or the other.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's crucial, especially when you're going into a tournament. You need to be able to go, okay, so what boards can I play, when? Also, you need to be like I was very wary as well, for example, of being long boarded. So I'd always pick boards. So if I got the objectives, I'd always pick a board with 3 to 4 on one side and 3 to 4 on the other side for placement. So I could always get my guys onto my opponent's side of the board quite quickly if I needed to. So I think and it's important not to, because some people obviously everyone will have their favorite board, but sometimes you have to give up that favorite board, to pick something else that's more appropriate for that playstyle in that particular time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Phil, do you have any more questions, or should we jump into the games here?
I think we can get going on the games.
All right. So, Sandro, what we'll be looking for you is you give us, if you can remember a player name, but give us the warband you matched up, and then kind of an overall sense of the game. As we get into some of the day 2, we may get more detail, but be as if you think there is something particularly notable or particularly interesting. That's what we're going to focus on. So we'll get a warband, a result, and highlights. But coming in, first game of day 1, what were you up against?
So I was up against Benny, which ironically enough, it was him versus me, in that store tournament back in November for the final game. So it was kind of like revenge, because we were playing both the same warbands. He was playing Cursebreakers.
Sure.
I was playing Grymwatch, and it was I managed to get a 2-0 against him in the round the whole of the first match. But what was notable about that is in game 1 he was very unlucky. And it's important to state that, because I remember he literally after activation 1 he tried to inspire Amis, he didn't. He tried to cast Abazoth and Making, that completely went awry, and so I was like, okay, so luck was on my side game 1. I think game 2 it was a lot more balanced. So in terms of because game 1 it was 18-8 to me, game 2 it was 19-17, so it was a lot it was a lot more balanced. But it was the fact that being able to pick off kills with so again in game 2 I actually lost Crack Marrow very early on, which put me in a tough spot. But then again, I was able to adapt quickly and get Griswold and Valerique to get in there and pick off a lot of kills with the Trophy Belt and Tome of Offerings, which basically balanced out the glory difference at the end. But yeah, I think for me, Benny's a really good player, but I think the first game would have been very different if some of his spell rolls would have gone off, how he wanted them to. So
yeah, I have definitely played that game against Benny, where at the end of 4 activations, he's cast 1 spell despite 7 or 8 attempts or so. So
yeah, harsh, super harsh. But yeah, so I think that was like game 1. Game 2, I went up against a good friend of mine, Brian Kelly, as Mornflight. And that, I think it was, again, I was very lucky in terms of, because I'd practiced against that matchup nonstop for a whole week. I kind of like, it comes to a point where I was like, okay, I almost like knew what they were going to do before they were doing it. And, just because they, okay, so they're going through these 2 objectives, they're going to probably score, fleeting memories, or, they're going through a block text, they're going to end up next to one of my guys, which basically meant, okay, I can almost predict what's going to happen. And then it allowed me to be at a point where I was like, okay, so I know almost that this particular piece might not be in immediate danger. It'll be in danger later, but right now, if they're going to score this X objective, then they'll need to do some, and so it was the fact that I was also able to get some lucky kills, and also some very lucky critical defense rolls that swung the game my way. So I think, again, it was a 2-0. It was 21-10, and then 22-6 in game 2. But it was the fact that I was able to quickly get a lot of glory off, and start killing stuff really early on. And also, Brian missing some key attacks that would have definitely swung the game his way. So that was round 2, and then round 3, it was against Dan Jones. This is the only game overall that I lost. So game 1, I won 24-19. Game 2, it went to him for like 18-23. So it was a zero glory difference at that point.
Oh my gosh.
And then game 3, it was like, so it was 0-4 to him, but only because we went to time. So there was like literally 6 minutes left. And it was whoever drew the best hand for, and we played.
Sure.
But the thing that I really, really liked was that, and this is for me, the big highlight was, so game 1, it was the fact that, so Dan started off really strong, and he started off scoring, scrum, temporary victory, the whole thing.
Remind us, he's running Thorns, is that correct?
Thorns, yeah, sorry. Yeah. So he was running Thorns, and it was it felt very reminiscent of the game that we had back at Tritex Games back in November. And what I really liked was the fact that I was able by turns 2 and 3 to score very big and to take that game back. Because if you started watching our game at the beginning, it looked like he was going to win, like hands down. But the fact that I was able to keep my objectives, wait, and just basically make those plays towards the end of rounds 2 and 3, and brought that back. And then, like I said, he then flipped that over and took momentum in game 2 and took that back. And then game 3, it was just the fact that it was whoever had the best cards at the beginning, and it went to him. So shout out to him. And this is one of the things that I really like about our community as well, because so one of my friends saw me at the end of round 3, and Dan and I we were joking. He came and gave me a hug. He was like, good game and everything. And it was just such a nice. So I wasn't even like salty or anything. I was actually it was a legit, like, we ran out of time. He had the better hand. He won. Hands down. It was a very, very good match. He's a very good player. And looking forward to our next match, when because I've beaten him once, he's beaten me now, so it's all about who can get who wins the next game.
Well, it's interesting. So Dan Jones is part of the Ready for Action crew, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I feel like that crew. I'm sure you folks who play over in the UK are all aware that they have a good stable of players there. I think it gets a little undersold just because it's been a little while since they had a podcast out. They do their YouTube thing, but we know some of the names like Michael Carlin and John Reese. But I think I went back and started looking, like, man, these guys have been up there a lot. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. No, Dan's a great player. He's got like a great tactical mind.
Yeah.
And for me, there was a particular point in game 2 where it could have gone either way, but then he just made he made a charge through one of my guys with one of his like little ghosts. I think it was the headless ghost guy. And then he played like sudden appearance to like bring everyone close to him, and then he just inspired everyone, because he didn't kill my guy, but then he knocked me off the objective and managed to like not only get all his positioning in place, but then also inspire a whole bunch of ghosts. And so I was like, it was just a brilliant move. And I think that he's a great player, and I'd definitely not underestimate him on his worst day, let alone
well,
when he's had his breakfast. So.
So at that point, you're 2-1, but your one loss is you've gone 2-0, 2-0, and then 1-2, and even that was on just a minus floor. You didn't lose much glory in that loss. So
correct. Yeah.
So you know that there's still a chance for it going into Game 4. And what did you have there?
Yeah, absolutely. And so Game 4, I came up against Freya from the Steel City. Underworld. So I was like, okay, so I'm literally that whole. So this is the first tournament.
That is a murderer's row. Wow, that is rough.
Absolutely, I was like, I know every single person I'm playing against, and they're all very good players. So I was just like, okay, this is another one. So I was like, let's see what this and obviously Freya's playing Curse Breakers. So I was like, okay, so and again, it was a matchup I knew very well because I played them for a while, and I know what they can do. So that for me, it was like, okay, so it's just a matter of how aggressive are they going to be? How many spells are they going to cast? And so for me, it was a matter of, yes, I will be putting some lethals next to them. Yes, I'll be putting some blocked hex down the board. So, and again, I was very very lucky that I managed to get some So there were some spells that were cast, some spells that were missed. I managed to also take that that match 2-0. It was 20-15 and then 20-13. And for me, I think the point that I was probably the proudest of, it was like when I'd make certain moves, like for example, I'd upgrade a guy or thinking and Freya would be like, oh, okay, I have no idea what you're doing, or I have no idea why you're doing that. And it might have been something silly as like giving the Herald that was like way back, on the other end of the board, Larva Lance. But then obviously Freya not knowing that I had like Spectral Wings or, some other way for me to get him to the other side of the board to maybe be able to make that attack. So I think it's all about as well like unpredictability, and when you can plan 2-3 turns ahead to go, okay, so if this happens, what's my contingency plan? And so for me, it was very much like that kind of mindset. Every game I went to, I was always thinking, okay, so this is my end game, this is what I want to do, but then if that goes awry, what can I do with the other pieces I've got on the board? What could be like my insurance policy to still be able to get me as much glory as possible?
So you walk out of this match 3-1, and the one loss was not particularly bad. Did you feel confident you were making the cut? And at what point did you know that you had made it into the top 16 and we're going to be playing on day 2?
So we were using the CPB app. So like at that point, I saw like when my results went up, I was like 11th, and I was like, oh, but then I didn't think. I thought, oh, I might, this is like the preliminary results, and then I dropped like to 12th, 13th, 14th, and I kind of stayed there. But then obviously the app then they hit everything, so we couldn't see anything, and I was like, okay, so if I don't make it to the I was definitely sure that I was like in the top 30. It all depended on other matchups and what other glory difference was going on with other players. So so for me it was all about, okay, so whatever happens, I did my best. I had some really good matches. I played against some really tough players. So whatever happens. And so being able to, and then when my name appeared on the board, and I won the first day prize for the best Grymwatch player, I was extremely happy. I was ecstatic. Yeah.
Say something more about it. Were they doing prizes for that, or was it just sort of an announcement?
So basically, they did the prizes for whoever like placed the highest with the particular warband.
Oh, very cool.
If you didn't come top 16, that was really, really cool. And that for me, I was like, oh, I'd already won. I'd already won everything in terms of. I was so proud because the Grymwatch are like my favorite warband. So being able to like place in the tournament, for starters, being able to place top 16, I was ecstatic. And then winning the best Grymwatch player award as well. That was for me. That was like, yes, even if day 2 was horribly wrong, I know that day 1 was awesome. So I was very happy in terms of of the thing, how it went.
Sure. So let's talk about day 2. You're coming into day 2. This is Is this your first time being? Because your previous win would have been on a 1-day Grand Clash.
Yes,
Is this
correct.
have you been playing on the second day of a Clash before?
No, this was my first second day of a clash, so that was quite special as well.
All right.
So yeah, so in
Who are
terms,
you?
yeah,
So you said you're coming in at the 14th seed.
yeah,
All
correct.
right. So that would put you playing the 3rd seed probably. And who is
Yes.
that?
So that was that was Bart. So that was Bart's. So I played against Thorn. So ending day one, I was thinking, and when I saw which warbands qualified, so I think we had something like 6 Thorns,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
almost half of the of the roster of players that qualified. And so I was like, oh, okay, so chances are I'm probably going to play Thorns of the Briar Queen. But in terms of things that I learned from the first day, I learned that Thorns are no longer that tsunami that comes at you against Grymwatch, and because they can match you model for model. I was like, no, actually, if I stick to my game plan, even if they take the lead in game one, I can bring games 2 and 3 back. I can bring rounds 2 and 3 back and still win. So that was for me the biggest thing that I took away from in terms of lessons that I've learned. So I played against Bart's Thorns of the Briar Queen. And this was, again, game one. I was extremely lucky. So I won the board both games, which was great because I got to get to set up the objectives. And then I also, the first game, I rolled crits like a god, literally. I was just so lucky with crits. I mean, at one point, there was, I think I killed, this is the game where I killed something like 4 ghosts where Crackmarrow had belt and
Oh
glory,
no! Wow.
Some glories. So I won game 1 30-12, which for Thorns versus
wow.
Grymwatch is unheard of. And it was complete. I was just like, well, it's one of those games where if you're just rolling crits, then you can't go wrong. I mean, Bart is a great guy, and but yeah, it was just one of those games. Also, he did a lot, he deployed Varklav extremely aggressively, which took me, that took me by surprise because normally you don't see Varklav up in your business at all. So him deploying him so aggressively, and he was also playing a flex aggro Thorn, so that was so I had to adapt to that because I was like, he had the upgrade, Varklav's upgrade, that's basically giving him +1 glory if he kills a dude.
Yeah, sure. Shacklegeist chains, maybe.
That's it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so that's an upgrade you don't see often in Thorns. So that also, I was like, oh, okay, that's a thing that's happening.
Sure.
So I had to be like, okay, I need to stay as far away from Varklav as possible.
And that's an interesting moment. You occasionally have those moments in games where you say, you're going into, you say, I understand this matchup, I know what's going on, and then one of those cards will come out, like Shacklegeist Chains. You say, oh, maybe I don't understand what they're doing, and all of a sudden you're, so it's a good job to you to maintain composure and kind of press through. Sometimes that can destabilize me enough where I get off my game plan.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think I mean, for me, it was, by that point, I was, so I actually got to see that card game one, where I had a lot of, in terms of glory points. I mean, he managed to catch up because of that card and, being able to also score some late game objectives as well. But knowing that he had that card from game one, I was able to then, when I saw it again, games two, it was like I wasn't taken aback as much. And I think what your point is super important I think sometimes when the card's revealed, it can have a huge impact on the other player if they're not prepared for it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then game two is actually when I that was when I drew the that card combination that I was like, okay, I cannot score this. I need to get rid of this, which was Solid Gains, Opening Gambit, and
Combination Strike.
Combination Strikes. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I'm not going to do anything with this. Get rid of this. But then that allowed me to draw into Name of the King, and then Gathering Momentum, and if I remember correctly, it was the Supremacy. So which was a lot better hand, by comparison. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, we're back on, and even then, I still managed to get 21 to 9 on the second game. So even though I discarded, three objectives, that was it was still a good game in terms of.
Sure.
Interesting. So it sounds like in these Ghosts matchups that Trophy Belt and Tome of Offerings ended up being really clutch because you were able to gain tons of glory without needing it to all come from objectives.
Absolutely, 100%. That was I think that the fact, because they have such push, the push factor with them is so important, and you're never going to get rid of Varklov. Unless he's like extremely deployed extremely aggressively and you can get him off the board, you're always going to be, at a disadvantage in terms of mobility, no matter how many push cards you have in your power deck. So it's all about like, okay, so what can I take off the board when? And you almost kind of have to there were certain times where I just ignored the queen and I went for everything else because I was like, okay, she can only charge once. And, even if she was at a point where she could just do multiple attacks, if she was killing my small guys, I can always bring them back with the Ghoul Call.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to just siphon off that extra glory was super important. In this kind of matchup.
It's interesting because often I would think that, having to throw away, it sounds like 4 end phase glory at the right at the outset, you might feel like his death knell, but that was a particularly obvious decision. There's no way, this is literally impossible to score. Sometimes you're like, maybe I have time to cycle one or not, but that's a throw it away. And then just know that you are going to be turbocharged and then have the potential to run out of fuel, and so play accordingly. So that's another one. Not to let yourself get too downhearted. I think if I was into the top 8 and suddenly saw I was going to have to discard a starting objective hand, that'd be a tough moment. But well done there. So you move on to the semifinal.
No, this was top 16. Then I moved on to the top 8 against Ben Davis and his Morphle.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, this was because of my previous day and how well I did against Brian's Mournflight. I was like, okay, so I know this matchup quite well. I know that there's a finite number of things that they can do. They do it very well, but I was like, okay, I know I can take this. And one for me, the highlight of this was when Ben started flipping objectives and getting rid of objectives. Just from the board, he just took cards that was like, oh, flip this on your territory or do this. There's also an upgrade I think that he was playing that was if a Banshee ended on an objective, it would get flipped or something like that. And so that for me, I was like, okay, alarm bells. I need to start getting on objectives and I need to start scoring some of my glory.
Mm-hmm.
And so like the first match ended, it was 20-12, and then the second match was 21-7. So I think that because I saw again that he sprung that strategy on me in game 1, and I was just like, right, okay, so I need to start killing some Banshees, and so I actually was a lot more aggressive in terms of how I deployed and just like the choices I made, because I was like, okay, I need my objectives. I need to be scoring my glory. So at that point, I was just like, Crackmarrow and Grizzlewell and Valorate need to go and just take some ghosts off the board. And I think by game 2, it was this was actually the game where I went. It was round 1. I went so In the Name of the King, Temporary Victory, and Gathering Momentum. So that was and so that set up the pace and the tempo for the rest of the game. I think that. I definitely think game 1 was a lot more challenging than game 2 in terms of when I went up against that. Just because when you when you saw that strategy, and that was the first time I saw the flipping objective Banshees, and I was just like, oh, okay. That was and also Ben's a very good player. I mean, I've done skirmish. I've been in skirmish tournaments with him where he was playing the Goblins way back when. And he completely wiped my Grymwatch off the board. So I definitely was not underestimating him in any way, shape, or form. And then that's when it took me to so after this match, it took me to the semi-final against John Reese.
Yeah.
And his Mournflight. So it was the third time I was playing against Ladies Harrow's Mournflight. And the first match, it was actually quite tight. And again, it was so John missed a particularly important attack where it would have, because he had one of the Banshees with the Tome of Offerings, which would have given him +2 glory for that kill. And then but he missed that. And then right after that, I missed a Crackmarrow's attack with Belt and Tome of Offerings that would have given me 3 glory for that. So had both those attacks still gone off, the game would have still ended the same way. But it was even closer. It was 18-17. So
Ooh.
that was
Wow.
yeah, that was very that was a very intense match. And then going to game two, it was 21-15. So again, it was I think game two, because I'd seen his play style. He played very aggro banshees. It was easier for me to go, okay, so I need to make sure I don't give him kills early on. I need to make sure that I'm getting onto my objectives and scoring my stuff as early as I can, and killing banshees as early as I can. So that was and then by that point, I mean, when I had my first match against Bart, I never thought, I was like, okay, whatever happens, will happen. And so, but when I was like, oh, I'm top 4 now, and then I was like, oh, I'm in the final now, I was like, okay, kind of like that moment, that surreal moment where you kind of like, you're happy and you just don't believe that you've got to that point where you've gotten.
The story so far feels like it's been, you correctly anticipated a lot of what you'd be facing, and so you had a lot of reps against what ended up being some of your most important games. I mean, they're all important, but having those repetitions against Banshees was invaluable, especially when it came to day 2. Knowing the matchup into Thorns, crucial for your day 2 route was improved by correctly predicting what you'd be facing and building to that. And then I would say, to me, it sounds like if we've talked about it before, if you are playing against someone like a John Reese or something like that, on the one hand, you played a bunch of very excellent players that they're known names and such in the previous day, and so that gives you a little bit of extra confidence. But if you play against the John Reese, if you play against an Amon, or play against the Sandro, everyone's got to play the game, and they can, they may make a mistake, or the dice may not go their way. So you just got to play the game in front of you and not worry about who it is so much as the game itself. But you got to be feeling good. You're back into the finals now, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it was and again, I know Frederick from the ETC route, because I actually went to Serbia last summer to partake in the ETC, so for Underworld. So that was so again, I was no stranger to Frederick, and I actually got a chance, because I finished my match against Reese, John Reese, quite early. So then I got to watch Tommy face off against Frederick, and to see a lot of the because they were actually playing on stream then, and just seeing that the curse breaker dynamic and how aggressive he was being, that prepared me sort of like kind of like mentally going into his match, going, okay, so he's going to take no prisoners. It's going to be one of those tough finals where and when we ended up like sitting down facing off against each other, for me the crucial point, and it was right at the beginning of the game, it was when he'd actually placed Stormsire in a corner, because I
remember this moment.
He won and then I just went, okay, fine, I have a glory that I can spend, I've got Grizzlewell, I am going, I played Haymaker, I was like, I need to get this guy off the board, I need to get Stormsire off the board, because he is by far the biggest threat, best spellcaster, he just needs to go, and doing making that charge against a trapped Stormsire, getting the 3 damage right off the bat, and then being able to go seize weapon and take him off the board, that was huge. And that was that was, for me, that was a turning point in game 1, and then by that same token, the fact that it just set the tempo for the rest of game 1. And then but then he managed to make, because he's a really good player, he managed to bring back the game in game 2, and where I found myself, I was like, okay, so there's not much I can do here. It was just by that point, I think we ended the match with I had 3 guys left on the board. He took Crackmar, he took all the big threats out, and there was just nothing I could really do. And then going into game, so it was all about, okay, so just gonna forget game 2 ever happened. Let's just go, into game 3 and and set things up. And I think, again, being able to, again, positioning was very key there, because especially right at the beginning, when I was able to stop him denying me the inspiration in game 3, that for me, that was a crucial moment where I was able to go, okay, so I'm gonna use distraction, bring, I think it was either Amis or Rastus, next to the bats, and then I was like, okay, Crack Marrow's doing all kinds of damage, and I'm just gonna spend activations to attack and get this piece off the board. Because the moment that happened, then I was like, okay, he wasn't able to stop me from inspiring, and then that I think and also the final charge with Crack Marrow into Stormsire towards the end, making him also use all of his power cards, all of his spells to get rid of the Herald, to then just bring the Herald back, make that charge, so whatever happened, I had a contingency plan to be able to secure me that final victory.
Yeah, and that was it. You were the champ. So, to your name, how did it feel? Are you still basking it, or are you already thinking about the next thing?
Well, I'm still. So I felt incredible. It feels, obviously incredibly good to be able to take the trophy home. I'm already thinking, like what May is going to bring, because I think there's going to be another Grand Clash in May, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm thinking, obviously looking forward to the new warbands. When they come out, what cards they might bring. How they're going to slot into the Grymwatch. Because I definitely want to stick with them. They are like my favorite warband for now. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's just been great. It's been absolutely a ride so far.
So we've got a couple follow-up questions then. So you did play on the stream. What was the experience like playing on the stream? Was it would you just play your game, or was it were you aware of it?
So I was actually I wasn't as aware of it as I thought I was going to be. So because obviously back when I won my first Grand Clash, it wasn't streamed back then. Mm-hmm. So I'd never had the playing on stream experience. The only thing, I think it was in game 2 where I just forgot to turn my my cards to uninspire my guys. So I had I think it was Niall from the that was looking out for the chat and whatnot, that he came and he was like, don't worry, I'm going to flip them back up and whatnot. And that was very nice of him. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that definitely distracted me a little bit in game 2. But I think other than that, I think by and large, it was I wouldn't say that it hindered my experience in any way, shape, or form. It was actually quite nice because my friends were like watching from home, my partner as well. So then when I left, when the tournament finished and I checked my messages, I had almost a breakdown of everything that happened on the stream, which was very nice. But so that was quite a good opportunity and a good experience as well.
Mm-hmm. It was I got to watch almost all of it live as it was happening. It's very exciting you're in the chat there. I remember the Stormsire losing his arm to Gristlewell.
Yeah. Gristlewell, yeah.
That was a moment where everyone, you could see the Gristlewell charge coming. Everyone's like, oh, he's got a glory to spend, and so it made for a pretty fun spectator sport. So cool. They're steadily improving. I think there's some changes they can make in how they show it, but I think they've got something there if they can refine it. Phil, you got any questions?
Yeah. So I guess just as a kind of a quick recap, what were some of your takeaways overall from the tournament, and what do you think you can apply from this one going forward?
In terms of takeaways, I think that I like that the meta's at a state where I wouldn't say like any one particular warband is king. I think it's a matter of, I think, positioning is ever more important now than it ever was. And again, for me, the big takeaway it was knowing your matchups really well, trying different warbands, learning how they play, because that literally sets you up. Like, there's nothing worse than you going to a tournament facing off against a warband that you've never played before, either with or against, mm-hmm. and then you just don't know what to expect. So I think for me, a lot of it was predictability, and a lot of it was just knowing what my opponent's going to do, and mm-hmm. then just planning ahead. Mm-hmm. And I think the fact that I took the Friday, I literally, because there was a skirmish event there as well, I decided not to go. I decided to just stay home, rest, just make sure that I was mentally, physically prepared for the next day. Mm-hmm. I think that for me was key, and then just try and enjoy yourself, because I literally, like, honestly, obviously I wanted to get to the final and win, But I went there just going, I'm going to go with my friends and enjoy myself. And I think that's the most important thing. Just have fun. Don't get bogged down by the pressure, because I think that can get to some people. And I think just as long as you're having fun, win or lose, that's the important.
Fair. Let me ask you this. So you had 8 matches. 6 of them were 2-0 wins. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And then 2 of them went to three games, and time became a factor in one or both, right? Did the final ended after 2 or? Yeah.
Final ended, but the good thing about the final was that because literally it was just us there. So it was, we managed to just get we actually managed to play throughout the whole round, which I'm really happy for, because I win or lose, I would have, it wouldn't have felt right, if we hadn't been able to finish that final game.
Well, but what is your thought? Do you think 90 minutes is enough? Do we need to take a look at increasing game length, or would players just take that much longer and fill up the available time, based on your experience and then maybe seeing what was going on around you as well?
I think the thing is, obviously, if the game is going well for one particular player, then obviously 90 minutes is more than enough time, because all you need is to win 2 games and that's it. Now, speaking objectively and having experience, so a game lost because of time, because ultimately time was a big factor in my third game against Dan. I think 90 minutes might not be enough. I think I would definitely look at, extending it, even if it's something as silly as like an extra 15 minutes. That might be ideal. I think sometimes it's especially if you've got if you're playing 7-man versus 7-man warbands, there are just so many like tactical decisions you need to make. That it's that sometimes 90 minutes is definitely not enough time.
Sure. And we're talking about matches where there's 2 players who clearly know the game extremely well. We experienced on the much smaller scale with our local event recently. I ended up just extending the rounds quite a bit because we had so many new players, that they were taking much longer than 30 minutes per game. And we'd get away with it sometimes, or there'd be a round where everyone went 2-0 one way or the other, but then we had a game or a round where there were a bunch of 2-1s. And so I think what we're seeing is that whether you're a new player or a very experienced player, there's the potential for 90 minutes to be awfully constraining. So it might be something to look at, although it's a logistical challenge, I'm sure, for the organizers.
Yeah, absolutely.
We know you're sticking with the Grymwatch. Looking forward to seeing the Universals. We've kind of talked about your thoughts on the meta. Phil, we got anything else to wrap up with here? Or?
Not really. I guess I kind of wanted to circle back on some of the meta stuff, just in terms of how you feel the overall warband spread is represented, and how do you feel warbands are balanced between each other, and then where do you think that will change as we continue to fill out season 3 here?
At the moment, there is definitely, especially with the latest Forsaken and Restricted list, it balanced the meta a lot more. Before, it felt like aggro warbands didn't have much of a chance against some of the objective play style. But I certainly felt like where it stands now, you can play. I think flex is definitely the way to go, in my personal opinion. I think that it'll be interesting to see like what the Hawthorns, I think that's what they're called, Mantrappers and the Nurgle boys, what they bring to the table.
Yeah.
So I think that there might be some very interesting mechanics there that we just don't know about yet. So I'm very looking forward to seeing how they match up against the Grymwatch and against the Thorns, because I feel like they're like 2 of the they're 2 of the warbands to beat at the moment, alongside Curse and the Banshees as well. I think they're for me, I think they're 4 of like the strongest warbands at the moment, for different reasons. I think that I'm actually very happy that because the Thorns, it's very interesting because obviously they're them alongside the Curse they're the core warbands from the Nightfall set. And then I remember the Thorns were very good when they came out, and then they kind of trailed off a little bit, in terms of like people just weren't really playing them. They weren't really represented that well in tournaments, and I'm really happy to see that they that with a simple change in terms of like objective play or with a simple change of just universal cards coming out, that a warband can become really, really good again. And so I've got I'm hoping one day I can go back to Lars Guardians and
Yeah.
and making them extreme, making them competitive again. I
Yeah.
think because they're, like I said, they were all one of my favorite warbands as well. So I think just being able to hold hope for the future, and like I said, looking forward to seeing what the new warbands bring, because I imagine a lot of people will probably, especially if you had those players that liked Mollog back in the day, they're probably like gonna find kindred spirit in the Mantrappers, and I think there's Nurgle usually has a huge following as well, so
Sure.
we're probably going to see those two quite represented in tournaments. So we'll see.
Right. Two warbands that look very different from the Thorns and the Grymwatch. So be interesting to see what kind of impact they or the universals they come with have. It'll be fun. I think that's about going to wrap it up for us. Sandro, do you have anything else you wanna touch on before we start closing up?
No, I just want to say thank you very much for having me over, guys. I've been listening to your podcast since you guys started way back when.
Yeah.
So for me it was a great honor for you guys to invite me over and to share my thoughts with you. So thank you very much.
Oh
Yeah, well, we're super happy to have you.
yeah. We'll watch for the Guardians to come back in, and we'll pull you in when you get your third clash with the Guardians.
Looking forward to it.
All right, sounds good. So as always, as we mentioned at the top of the show, you can get in touch with us at WTHcast and whatthehexcast@gmail.com. If you want to check out the extensive stuff that we put out on the network, it's themortalrealms.com. We've got all our different podcasts on the website there. There's also a link to the Patreon if you want to take a look there, and we'll have one in the notes. We just use it as a tip jar, as a few extra little bonuses throughout the network. There's a Discord where we chat on. It's again for all the people from the different podcasts. Fun place to be there. And then otherwise, we'll see you on the Facebook groups and in different spots. You recommended listening for this episode. We're going to say it's Victory Lap by Nipsey Hussle with a tip of the hat there, Sandro. So take a victory lap. You've earned it. And that will do it for What the Hex. I've been Davey.
This is Phil.
This is Sandro.
And then Sandro, if you give and this is Sandro. Yeah.
Yeah, this is Sandro. Sorry.
All right, you're good. Yep. It's been a while. There was a long stretch there where I forgot to tell every guest about that, and so that we'd have exactly that moment every time. And this one, I returned to my old form and did that. So I'll briefly interject with a story of my own. You talked about having the game look like you're going to lose in that in the first game of the match, correct? I was on the receiving end of that. I recently, as a shout out to Matt, aka Pastor, on Discord. I went into round 3 of a game against Grymwatch. I was up 17-4, and during his round, he made one charge with the Duke. He drew a card, he put a fighter on guard, and he moved a fighter, and he outscored me 16-2 in that round, and won it 19, or he won it 20-19. So that was my version of that, all looking like, I there's no way I could lose this. This looks in the bag, and then being the person getting dunked on in the poster. So I'm glad for Dan that he could rebound from that. For me, it was the game 3 of the match. So all I had to do is sit and ponder what all went wrong. But anyway,